So it's an unbelievable good preservation of this enclosure, which had been erected by Stone Age people so long ago.
Before his death, Klaus Schmidt, discoverer of Göbekli Tepe, spoke of a secret he had long kept hidden. A quiet mound called Gürcütepe, where he believed the true origin of civilization might still lie buried. Why did he guard it so fiercely? What truth was so powerful that he chose not to reveal it until the end? It's a surprising fact that we have monumental architecture so early in human history. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey changed everything we thought we knew about our prehistoric past. When archaeologists uncovered its massive T-shaped stone pillars carved more than 11,000 years ago, the framework of prehistory was shaken. Until then, it was widely believed that religion, monumental architecture, and complex societies only developed after the rise of agriculture. But Göbekli Tepe, a ceremonial center built by hunter-gatherers thousands of years before farming took hold, forced scholars to rethink the origins of civilization. At the heart of this discovery was Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist whose vision transformed Göbekli Tepe from an overlooked mound into one of the most important archaeological revelations of the modern era. Arriving in the 1990s, where others had seen scattered stones, Schmidt saw a sanctuary. For nearly 2 decades until his death in 2014, he excavated, studied, and interpreted the site, bringing it to international attention and raising profound questions about human history. What many people don't realize is that Schmidt also explored another intriguing site nearby. In the mid to late 1990s, while Göbekli Tepe was still emerging in the archaeological world, Schmidt and his team conducted surveys at a site called Gürcütepe, just a short distance from the city of Fanlan-Turfa. Today it lies beneath farmland and modern settlements, barely visible. But beneath this landscape are traces of prehistoric life that may hold crucial clues to a hidden chapter in our story. Gürcütepe may represent the period after Göbekli Tepe's ceremonial enclosures were abandoned. Archaeologists have long wondered what happened next. Did the people migrate? Did their traditions evolve? Gürcütepe could be the missing link, the gradual transition from monumental sanctuaries to the birth of permanent communities. What Schmidt found there was so startling that it could completely reshape what we know about the Neolithic era. While Göbekli Tepe towers above the landscape, Gürcütepe blends into the ordinary terrain. Located roughly 3 to 4 kilometers southeast of Fanlan-Turfa on the Harran Plain, it looks like farmland, low houses, fields, roads. A passing visitor might never guess that underneath are the remains of prehistoric settlements. Early surveys identified 4 main mounds, but later assessment suggests the site may cover as many as 8, referred to as Gürcütepe 1 through 8. These aren't towering hills, but shallow rises, many of which have been damaged or leveled by modern agriculture and construction. Much of the archaeological record had already been disturbed by the time modern researchers arrived. Layers were cut into, and in many cases removed entirely. Archaeologists were left piecing together fragments, knowing much had been lost forever. Still, what remained was remarkable. The stratigraphy reached up to 6 meters deep in places, representing thousands of years of human activity stretching back to the late pre-pottery Neolithic. Unlike Göbekli Tepe, which functioned as a ceremonial center with no evidence of permanent habitation, Gürcütepe showed signs of everyday life. Archaeologists uncovered hearths, stone walls, workshops, and other features, pointing to people living, working, and raising families there. In the mid to late 1990s, Schmidt's team opened test trenches and immediately recognized the contrast. Where Göbekli Tepe had pillars and ritual carvings, Gürcütepe had domestic spaces, hearths, and tools, clear signs of settlement from the start. Schmidt referred to it as the other site, not a secondary curiosity, but a potential key to understanding how people transitioned from ritual monuments to permanent homes. Göbekli Tepe lacked hearths, storage, or signs of long-term residence. It was a place for ceremonies, perhaps religious or communal functions beyond daily life. Gürcütepe, however, had hearths, walls, and signs of continuous domestic occupation. This contrast framed one of the most important questions in Neolithic archaeology. How did early humans move from gathering for ritual to building villages? Before sites like Gürcütepe were studied, it seemed as if Göbekli Tepe had appeared suddenly and vanished without explanation. But Gürcütepe showed that life did not end with the enclosures. People settled, adapted, and developed smaller, enduring communities. Though less dramatic, this site held the quieter truths of human existence, the beginnings of households, of workshops, of local traditions evolving over time. It represented a bridge between the world of temples and the world of homes. Much of the site remains unexcavated. Only limited test trenches were opened in the 1990s, and large parts of Gürcütepe lie beneath houses and farmland. Despite this, the site still yielded evidence of continuous occupation stretching from the pre-pottery Neolithic B into later phases. Göbekli Tepe had towering pillars, carved animals, and public rituals. Gürcütepe had rectangular houses, stone tools, grinding stones, and figurines, symbols that entered private life. These figurines are especially compelling. Some are female, with full forms emphasizing fertility, others are male or gender neutral. They weren't part of public monuments, but of domestic life worn as ornaments, kept in homes, tied to daily practices. At Göbekli Tepe, symbols were massive and public. At Gürcütepe, they were intimate and personal, woven into cooking, crafting, and family life. This marks a cultural shift, not the end of ritual, but its integration into everyday living. This is why archaeologists view Gürcütepe as a bridge. Göbekli Tepe represents the height of ceremonial gathering. Gürcütepe represents what came after the turn inward to domestic life. For years, these ideas rested on Schmidt's limited data. Then, in 2021 and 2022, archaeologists returned under the TSH Templar project to investigate early Neolithic sites around Şanlıurfa. For the first time since Schmidt's work, Gürcütepe was re-excavated using modern techniques. They focused on Gürcütepe III and found well-preserved layers confirming long-term occupation. Hearths, walls, workshops, figurines, and tools all pointed to a community deeply rooted in daily life. The site belonged primarily to the later pre-pottery Neolithic B and into the pre-pottery Neolithic C, later than Göbekli Tepe, and confirming it as part of the next chapter. Symbols once carved in stone were now shaped into figurines. Rituals once held in vast enclosures were now practiced in homes. Architecture once focused on the communal was now centered on the domestic. It wasn't an ending, but a transformation. Schmidt always believed Göbekli Tepe and Gürcütepe were two sides of the same story. The new excavations are proving him right. Göbekli Tepe shows us a world of shared identity through monumental rituals. Gürcütepe shows us the rise of homes, tools, families, and everyday symbols. From temples to villages, this was one of the greatest transformations in human history. But what did daily life actually look like? At Gürcütepe, archaeologists found grinding stones, axes, flint tools, and animal bones, evidence of a mixed economy of farming, herding, and hunting. Mortars and pestles showed plant processing. Flint points and animal remains revealed that hunting remained important. It wasn't a simple shift to agriculture, but a blend of old and new practices. Symbolism remained. Close figurines and beads inside homes showed that spirituality lived in the household. Animal remains also suggested domestication was underway, with sheep, goats, and pigs appearing alongside wild game. This balance of wild and domestic reflected a society in transition, with one foot in the foraging world and the other in settled life. These routines reveal a new kind of timeline, one where communities adapted gradually rather than undergoing sudden change. When Göbekli Tepe and Gürcütepe are placed side by side, a fuller timeline of early civilization emerges. Göbekli Tepe belongs to the early pre-pottery Neolithic A and B, more than 11,000 years ago. Gürcütepe follows, showing how life evolved. Archaeologists believe the region still hides many undiscovered mounds, some already damaged, others still waiting beneath fields and towns. Urban growth threatens them year by year. At Gürcütepe itself, large parts have been lost. This has created a race against time. Every unexcavated season risks erasing more of the record. That's why the TSH Templar project is urgent. By documenting and protecting what remains, archaeologists aim to preserve the legacy that Schmidt glimpsed decades ago. After his death, the responsibility passed to his wife, Klaus Schmidt, and colleagues who continue the work. Still, mysteries remain. Schmidt left unanswered questions and clues that may never be fully uncovered. But for him, archaeology was never just about monuments. It was about people, their daily lives, their choices, and their resilience. Göbekli Tepe captured the world's attention, but Gürcütepe grounded it in human reality. Together they reveal that civilization did not begin with cities or writing, but with communities adapting and carrying their beliefs into new forms of life. That process began long before history was written, and its echoes are still buried in the soil of Anatolia. The story of Göbekli Tepe and Gürcütepe is not only about the distant past, it is about the evolution of human consciousness. It is about how belief, cooperation, and daily survival were intricately intertwined in the earliest forms of society. These two sites represent a continuum, not a contradiction. One tells the story of communal ritual and symbolic gathering. The other, the emergence of home, family, and domestic order. This progression is not abrupt but layered, like the soil that covers their remains, each layer revealing something deeper, older, more human. While Göbekli Tepe is often celebrated for its massive scale and dramatic carvings, its partner site is perhaps even more profound in what it reveals about the transformation of human priorities. The hearths of Gürcütepe are just as significant as the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, because they show the moment when survival and symbolism began to merge in the domestic sphere. When the focus shifted from gathering en masse to sustaining the bonds of family and community over time, something fundamental changed. Life became rooted. People began to see the land not just as a place to visit, but as a place to stay. This anchoring of human life to a specific place marked the true beginning of civilization. It was not built in a day, nor triggered by a single invention. It unfolded over generations as people learned to store food, build homes, raise children, and carry forward their values through stories, objects, and rituals. Figurines carved by hand, beads worn as personal adornment, mortars used to grind the first domesticated grains. These are not just artifacts, they are reflections of the human spirit, learning how to live with intention. And yet, despite all that's been uncovered, the story is far from complete. Much of Gürcütepe remains unexcavated. Modern life presses in from all sides, roads, buildings, agriculture, slowly eroding what little remains beneath the surface. The question now is not just what these sites can tell us, but whether we will still be able to hear them in the future. Archaeology is, at its heart, a race against time. Each year that passes without proper excavation means more damage, more loss, and fewer answers. This is why the continued work of Klaus Schmidt and her team is so critical. They are not just digging in the dirt. They are preserving a cultural legacy that speaks to all of humanity. The first temples, the first homes, the first symbols of meaning. They belong not just to Turkey, but to the shared memory of our species. Protecting these sites is not about nostalgia. It is about understanding who we are and how we came to be. In a world obsessed with technological progress and constant change, the buried remains of places like Göbekli Tepe and Gürcütepe remind us of something timeless. They whisper of a past where people found meaning not in how much they could accumulate, but in how they gathered, shared, and lived together. The lessons these ancient communities offer are not just historical, they are deeply relevant. In their rhythms of cooperation, adaptation, and symbolic life, we may find the roots of our future as well. So, as we uncover the past, layer by layer, we must also listen to the quiet mounds, to the worn stones, and to the fragile figurines that tell us how civilization was truly born. Not with empires, not with warfare, but with shared fires, common tools, and the stories etched into clay and memory. There is something profoundly humbling about standing over soil that once held the foundations of the world's first permanent settlements. For all our modern achievements, our journey as a species began with simple, deliberate acts: lighting a fire, shaping a tool, building a shelter, carving a symbol into stone. These acts were not random. They were expressions of intention. Each one carried with it a message that we were here, that we existed, that we made meaning of the world around us. Klaus Schmidt has often emphasized that these ancient places are not just archaeological sites, but living archives of human experience. What we dig from the ground is not simply an object, it is a fragment of a life once lived. A hearth is more than a fire pit. It is where food was shared, stories were told, and children learned the rhythms of life. A figurine is not just a carved artifact, it is a symbol of belief, a representation of hopes, fears, fertility, or protection. When we lose these things, we don't just lose data, we lose a voice from the human past. The threats to these voices are real. Urban expansion, looting, climate change, and neglect all endanger sites like Gürcütepe. Each year, as new roads are laid and fields are plowed, another layer of history risks being erased. What makes this especially tragic is that so much of what could be uncovered might answer the most fundamental questions of our existence. How did religion evolve? How did humans transition from mobility to permanence? How did we move from ritual gatherings to domestic intimacy? And most importantly, what did we lose and what did we gain in that transformation? The preservation of these sites is also a matter of justice, not only cultural but intergenerational. Future generations have a right to inherit the knowledge of their origins. If we allow these mounds to vanish under concrete and dust, we rob them of that inheritance. Just as we would protect endangered species or ecosystems, so too must we guard these delicate pages of the human story before they are torn away. Göbekli Tepe may stand as the symbolic high point of early ritual architecture, but it is Gürcütepe that offers the counterbalance, a record of what came after, of how people took those shared beliefs and began weaving them into daily life. In this sense, Gürcütepe may be more intimate, but no less important. It shows us the other half of the human condition, not just how we gathered together, but how we stayed together. The figurines found at Gürcütepe are particularly evocative. They do not shout, they whisper. They are not grand like the animal reliefs at Göbekli Tepe, but they hold their own power. Their small size suggests a different kind of symbolism, one that was personal, perhaps even private. They were carried, worn, or kept within homes. They may have been used in rituals related to childbirth, healing, protection, or ancestral remembrance. They speak of a culture in which spiritual life was no longer just communal, but also domestic. This subtle shift ritual, moving from public monument to private space, represents a major development in human society. It suggests that as communities became more permanent, belief systems became more individualized, or at least more embedded in the rhythms of home life. These shifts are not just archaeological curiosities, they speak to ongoing dynamics in human life today. We too live in a world where public and private beliefs coexist, where tradition adapts, and where meaning continues to be expressed in the everyday. The tools found at Gürcütepe also tell a story. Mortars and pestles, flint blades, and stone axes are more than utilitarian objects. They are symbols of a changing relationship with the land. They show a move toward domestication, not only of animals and crops, but of life itself. These tools enabled people to shape their surroundings, to impose order on nature, to produce surplus, and eventually to trade. With these developments came greater complexity, and from that complexity, the roots of what we would one day call civilization. And yet there is something deeply human about the simplicity of these early societies. They were not built on conquest or hierarchy, at least not in the way we see in later city-states. There is little evidence of social stratification in the earliest phases of Göbekli Tepe or Gürcütepe. What we see instead is cooperation, shared purpose, and communal effort. People came together to build not for personal gain, but for collective identity. They carved animals and abstract symbols not as decoration, but as a way of connecting to something greater than themselves. This is the legacy that Klaus Schmidt and her colleagues are fighting to preserve, not just artifacts, but values. In a fragmented world, the early Neolithic offers a model of connectedness. In a time of individualism, it reminds us of the power of community. In a culture obsessed with speed and progress, it calls us back to a deeper rhythm, the rhythm of seasons, of cycles, of memory. Their ongoing excavations are revealing more each year. New structures, new tools, new figurines, each one adding to the narrative, each one a piece of the puzzle. And with every discovery, the line between past and present blurs just a little more. We begin to see ourselves in these ancient people. We begin to understand that the desire for meaning, for connection, for permanence is not new, it is ancient. It is enduring. It is us. Ultimately, the question these sites pose is not only what happened here, but what does it mean to be human? The answers are still emerging. They lie buried in the soil, waiting for careful hands and open minds to uncover them. They lie in the work of those who dedicate their lives to peeling back the layers of time. And they lie in our willingness to listen, not just with curiosity, but with reverence. Because these stories are not separate from our own, they are our foundation. They remind us that civilization was not born with kings and armies, but with families and fires, with figurines and food, with stone tools and silent prayers. They show us that the past is not a distant country, but a mirror. And in that mirror we may yet find our way forward.